Thank you for tuning in to the Leadership Forum, a space where you will hear perspectives from global industry executives on human ingenuity and how they catalyzed it to unlock value and realize their organization's true potential. We will keep it real. We will hear what's worked well and learnings from instances where things could have worked better. I'm your host, Saquib, Vali, partner at Spiderworks and explorer. Say hi to the future, the fast-growing community highlighting the human side of ingenuity. Our guest today is Sandra Hawken, President and CEO, Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital Foundation. That's quite a mouthful. Sandra started a career in advertising and then about 20 years ago moved to the not-for-profit sector. Sandra has generated significant media attention for equity-focused charities. Sandra, tell me, what are equity-focused charities?
I'm glad you asked. Well, at Holland Bloorview, we focus on creating a world of possibilities for kids with disabilities. So in this role, the equity that we seek is inclusion of people with disabilities, a reduction of stigma for people with disabilities, and generating increased public attention, conversation, and support. And prior to that, I worked in the women's movement. So gender equality, violence against women, economic equality across the genders was what you would find me on the news talking about pretty regularly.
That sounds amazing. Sandra, so I went ahead and introduced you in how I've known you, how I've read. But why don't we let you introduce us to our listeners and how you'd want to get introduced to? And as you do me a favor, weave in there, what are two things that we get wrong? One, about kids' disabilities, right? Because I can assure you, we all have our misconceptions. And so I'd love for you to have this opportunity to clarify. And then also, on a broader level, do clarify if you get anything wrong about mission-led charities.
Fantastic. I love that framing and that prompt. So, your introduction of me was succinct and accurate. I started my career, I have a business degree, and started my career in the private sector, but very quickly realized that I, as a values-based decision maker and a values-based leader, that I was drawn to use my skills for good in the not-for-profit sector. And I am one of those people that cannot wait for Monday morning because I absolutely feel unabashedly grateful for what I get to do every day. A part of it, to your second question around what we get wrong about mission-led organizations and charities, when I worked in the private sector and you were charged with needing to do something innovative, creative, with ingenuity, it was often a matter of budget. But one of the things that compels me most in the sector that I work in now is you have to be many times more creative and resourceful and innovative when working from a scarcity mindset, ensuring that we're investing all the philanthropic dollars that are donated for our charity to run in a way that's responsible, but while also being the best in the world. So I think one of the misconceptions is that working or leading a not-for-profit is just like this really sweet thing to do. It is as hard, if not harder, in a more competitive marketplace than most any industry. And it's important for people who are thinking about investing into charity to recognize the importance of investing in innovation. If you care about a cause and you dwell on how much should go to administrative costs as opposed to direct services, then you're missing the opportunity for the charity that you support to really be able to be innovating and evolving. That having been said, it's important that the charities that you support expend money ethically as we do. And what I spend my day doing is thinking about and talking about and writing about and building partnerships for kids with disabilities so that they can have the fullest, most meaningful lives. And one of the biggest stigmas that we see in terms of kids with disabilities in the world is that there is either sort of two camps. There's this general sense of pity that these poor children that have these terrible things that are happening to them, and therefore an assumption that they're not going to be able to live a full and meaningful life. Or there's a recognition that that might not likely be the whole story, but as very polite Canadians, it's very important that we, be careful about what questions we ask, not, look away, not engage. And both of those things are challenging because people with disabilities are resilient, tenacious problem solvers who can tackle complex issues. These are the people that you want in your workforce. These are the people you want as your friends, as your partners, as members of our community. And whether someone is nonverbal and communicates differently than you and I, or uses a mobility device and moves differently than you and I, that doesn't mean they don't have as much to contribute or as much to say. And so our work at Home Bloorview is about removing those barriers and removing those stigmas.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's absolutely fantastic. So I'll one of the things that you said was investing in charities versus giving charity. Now that's a reframe for me. Because most of us think that after we've done everything we have, then we give something to charity, versus proactively thinking about investing in charity. So I think that's a reframe for me. On the second one, it's funny. My younger brother's deaf, right? And he got meningitis when he was 1 year old, and because of that, he lost his hearing. And the biggest sacrifice that my mom made was to put him in a school, which was a boarding school. So we were at that time in Africa, and put him in a boarding school in the US. Now, we were privileged, we could afford it and all that stuff. But on the other side, it was the single biggest sacrifice that my parents made, especially my mom, but my parents overall. And that was primarily because at the age of 7, imagine letting go of your child, to be, thousands, and we're talking about in 1980s, right? So at that time, no internet, no nothing. It was letter writing. And that sacrifice has stayed with me in terms of, I think in how I've even, we'll get to the story of Nathan in a second. I think there's a thought process about making accommodations or making sacrifices, but the result of that is so much more fruitful, right? So, for example, right now we're having this conversation around working from home or working remotely, right? That to me is an accommodation. Okay. Now, businesses are investing in that accommodation in a big way. So it's not that everyone else doesn't need accommodation. We think people with disabilities need accommodation. No, everyone needs accommodation, just in different ways. And in some cases, people with disabilities, those accommodations come far easily, but we don't choose to do so. So, I mean, that's just a thought that's out there.
Well, and if I could add, sometimes the accommodations that you make for people with disabilities create a better workforce for everyone.
That's
so
right.
The accommodations of working from home was something that had long been asked for people with disabilities, to make the workplace more accessible for people with disabilities. And with COVID-19 creating a moment where everybody needed to figure that out, we are at the most accessible point in history in terms of workforce and what that means for everybody, whether you're a parent or someone with a disability or someone who has other reasons to be able to benefit from flexibility. My only hope is that we don't go all the way back to pre-COVID and remove those accommodations that improve the ability to access great talent.
I'm with you. And with that, I think what I'd love to get to is, at Spiderworks, we delve into human ingenuity, especially the human side of ingenuity, right? And that's one of the things that I really wanted to have a bit more of a conversation with you. There are two that come to mind. I think one was how you've been championing this whole conversation around how people with disabilities actually make for amazing contributors, right, in the workforce. And you've been doing that in a big way, and so that's one, and that to me it's ingenious, right? And that takes a human side of ingenuity to get there. So that's one example, and then obviously the second one was I personally had the good fortune of meeting Nathan, and the fact that he was a patient, and then the journey of him now being an ambassador. which I think is ingenious, right? So keeping those as examples, or coming up with any other that you might have, give us a feel for what's your take on the human side of ingenuity, um, both within Holland Bloorview, right, um, as an organization. So take that as one, but also on the other side, what would you say? How does Holland Bloorview support and nurture ingenuity in the broader community?
That's so great. So I'll start inside Holland Bloorview and work my way out. So the first place that ingenuity is nurtured is among our staff team. We hire for ingenuity and then we nurture ingenuity. Sometimes that means, quite often, we have a high percentage of our employees who are former Holland Bloorview patients, like Nathan that you met. These are smart, resilient people who, from the time they were a toddler, had to solve problems, had to be creative, had to be innovative in a way that many of us as adults will never have to be. And so when we have this diverse workforce that also represents the work that we do, is ingredient number one. And ingredient number two is setting aside the time for us to cultivate that ingenuity, that innovation, that creativity. So in our workforce, we have compulsory time every month. It's called innovation time, where staff members spend 2.5 hours. They're not allowed to do regular project work, where they must be thinking big, thinking creatively, together or individually, to continue to be pushing the envelope. We say that we don't follow best practices at Holland Bloorview, we set them. And so if it starts within our corporate culture or our organizational culture, it exists because of who we serve. So, you referenced Nathan, who has spent his childhood and now as an adult is both an ambassador. He speaks widely at companies and works in our organization. And he would be capable of working in any organization, but he's so deeply connected to ours. Part of that comes from our belief that it is essential to co-create. We don't make a single decision at Holland Bloorview without including the voices of kids and families for whom we are providing clinical care or research, so that it's not just a bunch of us as experts saying, this is what you need, people with disabilities. We really stop to listen and create things together. It's also important to us that when we're raising awareness about disability inclusion or disability stigma, that it's not my voice. It is amplifying the voices of people with disabilities who we don't always get to hear. So whether that's Nathan, or that's someone who uses a communication device, or somebody who uses a prosthetic, their unique lived experience and perspective on the world, where we have the opportunity. I don't do a media interview without including somebody with disability along with me. So that's really important to us. And then when we think about the world beyond, so in our work at Holland Bloorview, where we are a teaching hospital, we provide clinical care. We're the hospital in Canada for kids with disabilities, but we also have the highest concentration of disability research for the pediatric population anywhere in the world. And that is really all about taking the special sauce that exists in our organization and exporting it, if you will. And some of this research is using technology like brain-computer interface to be able to enable a nonverbal child or adult to speak, to steal their wheelchair, to turn off and on a light using their mind. This is an example of a technology we developed to create a barrier reduction for youth inside of our institution, but where the impact can have a ripple effect that would be dramatic. As important as all that is, equally important is the conversations that we're creating. So whether that's in workplaces or in schools or in the community at large with policymakers around the importance of people with disabilities being able to be full contributors to the community. There's been loads of studies done that talk about people with disabilities having a higher rate of retention, of commitment, lower sick days. We had a study that showed there are a lot of employers are worried about the cost of accommodations to bring somebody into their office that has a disability. Often those costs are less than $500 and make the office better for everyone.
That's right.
And so we partner with, we have over 150 Canadian brands that we partner with to support on their EDI journey as it relates to including disability meaningfully, and create conversations and curriculum in schools and otherwise, so that when kids and youth and adults leave our hospital and go into the rest of the world, it can be as inclusive as the environment that we try to create.
That's amazing. And you know what, Sandra, use this forum. So if the listeners out there are going to be other corporations, right? Please use this forum. So if you were to leave a message for how could our listeners who wish to contribute in some meaningful way and would wish to partner with Holland Bloorview Kids Rehabilitation Hospital Foundation, what's the method? How would they do that?
One of the things that we believe strongly in terms of partnering with a corporate community is that it needs to be an authentic partnership that benefits both parties. We know that there's a lot of things, a lot of objectives that companies have, and so too do we. So we customize for everyone. But what it looks like often is, number one, being part of our vision to create a more equal world for people with disabilities. As companies are on their EDI or DEI journey, ensure the disability is part of it. And if you don't know how, we can help. We have a robust employee volunteering program. So if you're looking for something, whether that's skills-based or team building, to engage your staff in the community, if you're in the GTA, or even if you're not in the GTA and you want to do it virtually, we have a whole host of really meaningful activities that your company can do that are far more affordable than a lot of the team building opportunities that are out there. And then, of course, we have a host of events and philanthropic opportunities for people to engage with Holland Bloorview, both to increase the profile of your brand and to activate your employee engagement. And then finally, we have a youth employment program for anyone who is looking to hire someone with a disability, and even test it out if you don't have any hires yet in your company. A great way to do that is through a university student or a late high school student as a summer job, so that they can get that experience on their resume that otherwise they might not be able to get in the same way that their typically developing peers would. And you as an organization can see the benefits of having someone with a disability inside while being partnered with a job coach, and have all those accommodations thought about for you through our Youth at Work program.
That is so insightful. So let me ask you a reverse question, because I'm just curious. Do you have a program where some corporations could actually send their people to do an internship with you, so that they understand exactly how Holland Bloorview functions and have a greater sense of empathy on the other side?
I love the way you framed that. I don't think that we have something quite exactly as you've stated it, but we certainly do have. We're getting closer. So we have lots of opportunities for companies to engage at the board level. We have something called the Holland Bloorview Catalyst for next gen leaders, where they sit on a committee and get to know Holland Bloorview and also build their networking and business development and coordination skills. And then through our corporate volunteering, which is more group based, then people can come in a one-off or an annual basis. And then we have a more robust volunteer program. In fact, there's more volunteers than there are staff at Holland Bloorview. So we find that many of our corporate folks, once they get to know us, decide that they want to get involved in a really regular way. So while we don't call it an internship, and it's not structured internship, although I may steal that idea, Saquib, we definitely have lots of ways that people intersect and do kind of something that would be adjacent to an internship.
Yeah, and I mean, my thought there was, I remember my time from Procter & Gamble, and there would be time where I would be seconded, like I would be given hey, listen, here's a broadening role, a broadening assignment, in addition to your everyday work. And it might not be 9 to 5, or it might not be a whole day every day, but it might be, hey, you know what? Whether it's on a board or frankly on a volunteer basis, And I would go and do that. Like I remember the time when we would go and we would spend, and it would be at times it'd be a month, at times it'd be a year, in different cadences. Um, but then my role there was not just to go and spend that time for myself, but bring my learnings back to the organization,
Mm-hmm.
to improve ourselves. And what did we learn from that opportunity? So anyhow, but you know what? I'll leave that with you. Um, that's absolutely fantastic. We're gonna switch over to Sandra a bit, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
And and what I'd love to, you've had a storied career. Like, I mean, how many people are as um, fortunate and filled with gratitude as you are? You started in the for-profit, but then you moved to the not-for-profit. But in there as well, there are, the sort of places where you spent your time was extremely meaningful, like what you're doing today, but even in the women's shelter. So my thought for you would be, if you were to do this entire journey again, would you do anything different?
I love that question so much. And my instinct is to give you a really clever answer. But I'm just gonna be really transparent and honest. And the answer is I would do nothing differently. When I ended up at Holland Bloorview, it wasn't by design. But I could look back on my career and pretty much every single thing that I did led me to here. And so for that reason, I wouldn't change it. But also, I have a leadership philosophy that embraces mistakes and sees them as an opportunity to get curious, an opportunity to improve. And so even in our organization, when we, don't hit a home run or the path isn't exactly the way we originally plotted it out, we take a moment to celebrate when we mess up and celebrate what we've learned from it and how we're going to be better because of it. And so I think even the moments that, maybe were more painful than others, I'm glad they happened because it got me to where I am now doing the work that I'm meant to be doing.
That is such an amazing leadership philosophy. And you know what? I'll double click a bit on that one, which is, so Sandra, a lot of our listeners are other leaders, corporate leaders, business leaders, not-for-profit leaders. If you were to, in addition to what you've already said, if you were to say, hey, what would your advice be to other leaders who are up and coming, next geners, who might at some point in time take on a CEO role, not necessarily for not-for-profit, for-profit, it doesn't matter. What would your leadership of advice be?
I remember as a young woman, straight out of business school, sitting in my office thinking, if only the CEO would just ask me, I could help with X, Y, Z, because I know all the things. And while we often tease a little bit about early career professionals' sense of entitlement, I love it. So I would say I often think about that enthusiastic, naive Sandra from many decades ago when I'm leading. And it's important to me to co-create. We talked about co-creating with kids and families at Home Bloorview, but I co-create with all my staff. When we're doing our strategic plan, every staff in every role has a voice because that's how we come up with some of our best ideas, our freshest ideas. It's how our team becomes most engaged and has a sense of ownership. And it's an ability for us to be able to identify those hidden gems and superstars that might not be the natural extroverts or the on paper typical leaders. And so the fact that I am regularly, proactively asking all of our early career professionals for advice, sort of like in a reverse mentorship capacity, has really been at the core of what's allowed us to stay innovative, to stay fresh, to stay excited. And I was at a dinner with some peers not long ago in similar roles to me, and everyone was, feeling a little nervous about AI, and not so sure. We're going to wait to see what other people are doing, and they asked what I was doing. I said, well, we're in it already because my staff are in it already, and so we're not afraid because we are embracing. I don't want to be the person that says, oh, the tweet book, what's that about? And as I get further along in my career, in order for me to stay fresh, I need to ensure that I don't have an ego, that I don't assume just because I may have the most gray hair in a room that I have the most answers in a room. So I would say co-create and listen to those early career versions of yourself and their equivalents in your organization.
This has been an outstanding discussion. And you know what? We're about coming up to the end of our time, and it just went by so quickly, Sandra. If I were to just think back on our discussion, invest in charities, don't give to charities, right? People with disabilities and the accommodations that you can have may not be as expensive as one might think. And actually, the benefits are far greater. So got that. Ingenuity and creativity is something that is core in a not-for-profit, and actually at times far more needed and important as compared to in any other facet or industry. And then I'll leave it with your career or rather leadership advice of stay curious, ask. That in itself is just absolutely fantastic. So Sandra, thanks again for taking time out, from your mission-led schedule and sharing your insights. Our listeners would love to hear more from you. But before I let you go, coming into this, was there anything that you had on your mind that you really wanted to share that I didn't ask or we didn't get to?
You asked all the best questions, Saquib. This has been so much fun. There is nothing that I'm left lingering to say, but if anyone wants to learn more about what we do, the best way to find us is online at hollandbloorview.ca.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I'm sure people would love to hear more from you. We will tag you and Holland Bloorview in our show notes. So expect some flurry of people coming in and being curious and asking questions.
Fantastic. I love it. Thank you for including us and including the issue of disability in Say Hi to the Future.
Thank you so much. The Say Hi to the Future podcast series is produced by Sonia Romero, edited by Matt Miller, and special effects by Edward Vasquez. Please leave us your thoughts and let us know if there's a guest you want us to have a conversation with. You can find all Say Hi to the Future podcast series on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube.